We're looking at the development of the inner life. You have two lives. You have an outer life made in the womb of your mother, and you have an inner life that's taken its shape in the womb of the world. And so we've already said that you're born with a life, dead to God, self-centered, insane, controlling image, looking to other people, self-centered, insane, to tell you who you are. Now, you're going to have certain needs, and you'll look to others to meet those needs. If they meet the needs, your inner life is going to develop into a positive image. And now you're going to have to work to maintain that image. And when you can't work, you'll get angry and you'll fall into your idols. And when you fall into your idols, that disproves the positive image. In the same way, if people don't meet your needs, you'll develop a negative image. And then you'll be working to change all the time. And when you can't change, you'll get frustrated and fall back into your idols again. So we're looking at the development of your inner life. So here's an example of that. You have a little girl who's a thinker, and her father abandons her. They like security. What will that make her feel in the negative? Insecure. So she's going to work to try to have security. And when she can't have security, she's going to run and withdraw and fantasize and all those kind of things, which isn't going to help you with your insecurity. Now, if you had parents that thought you were wonderful and you could never do anything wrong, now how are you going to feel about yourself? You might have a positive image of being very lovable, but you might have to maintain that image of being lovable. You'll always be controlled at your point of image, and here's what we've been saying, is that you're this rock, and people walk around you, and they try to move you, but they have to move you at your point of image. And your point of image is your description of your inner life that's come about through the self-centered, the insanity, and looking for an identity that you're either trying to work to change or to maintain it. So we have a little diagram that will show that to you. And here's what that diagram looks like. In here, you just put down your personality traits. And so you can pick something and pick the thing that you are, because you can describe it the best. Or someone close to you, some significant person. I'm a thinker, I'm a feeler, doer. You put that in there. And then we give some examples of a person. And just start with Dad. And let's say that you don't know who your dad is. What's the enemy going to whisper to you? His job is to kill, steal, and destroy. You know, the majority of people that are adopted, they get to be about 20 and they want to find out who their parents are for a brief time, because there's a message that comes to that, and especially when you've had your own kids. Because now you've got your own kids and you're holding them, and if you're a mother and somebody tried to touch your kid, you'd kill them. And so what happened? How come? Well, the enemy's going to whisper. He's going to seize every single opportunity to tell me something about myself. And so we can look at these words here, and this is just here to help you understand that. And then, of course, what we'll do next is try to find all the flavors of the month to change me or maintain me. When that doesn't work, I'm back into my idols, and I go into this spiral. And notice this, once I'm in the spiral, how people hurt me or what happened to me doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anymore, and I'm not telling you to change your personality. You have a little top spinning here, and what we want to do is get the top to lay on its side, and we're looking for events outside of me that will disprove what I feel about myself. And I'm an event-oriented person, because when an event comes that proves it, the top just spins again, and there we have the little flesh top that we're talking about. And the flesh is my being under the rule and influence of something other than Christ. And so here's my attempts to change, and I end up with similar messages. Well, the similar message comes. It stirs the old identity, stirs the old idols, and my attempts to change, and I just keep spinning around with a storm inside of me. Okay, now those diagrams, you just have to walk your way through them. So you just look at those, follow A, B, C, D, and E. You've done it for yourself, so you ought to be able to do it. Just all you need is one or two examples, because we've described the inner life. We've been looking at that. So these three diagrams, you just have to walk through them. That's all you've got to do. I have an outer and an inner life. The outer life was formed in the womb of my mother. The inner life took its shape in the womb of the world. I got messages. We've already talked about that. Developed an identity, worked to change it, fall into my idols when I can't. Here's a diagram that's more specific. So you can put in here your personality traits. And do exactly, if you're doing a Sunday school class or a small lecture, give the people that sheet and have them fill it out, just like I did you. And walk them through it. That's the best way to learn, is to see how it applies to you specifically. We were doing this in Brazil, and the people, just in the end, were saying, we don't think we can do that history and ask the right questions and fill out this diagram. We just don't think we can do it. Because you've been doing it for 25 years, 30 years, so it's easy for you. You ask all the right questions, and you fill out the little chart. And I said, all right. So I had the interpreter just fill out his own in front of everybody. Huh. And so he just stood up there, and I think you were there for that, weren't you, Doug? Yeah. When Fernando did that? I just stood beside Fernando and said, Fernando, what's your personality? He says, well, I'm a doer and a thinker. Well, fill it in. Fernando, what was your hurts? And, he's a hard German. And he starts telling his hurts and starts crying. So, well, how did it make you feel? Well, then he told us. Well, what have you tried to change? You tried nearly everything. And then what did you do when you couldn't? And he just filled it out himself. And I said, now, if the interpreter can do it on his own, you can do it. And you can have somebody else do it. Because here's the thing. I don't have to know every single detail of your flesh, because the answer's coming. And the answer's the same if I hit this at 100%, 80%, or 5%. The answer's the same. Christ in you, the hope of glory. He doesn't want to improve you. He wants to remove you. And so you see that. You don't have to get that right. If the answer's the same, what's the difference? And so you don't have to get that perfect, that part of it perfectly right. But anyway, we're using this. It details it. And listen. You've had some peace in your life. A lot of it's been false peace when everything lined up and you weren't feeling any of these things anymore because of your outside circumstances. You got the promotion, you got the money, this worked out for you, that worked out for you, somebody wanted to marry you, all of that kind of stuff. It stops it for a while. But then other events are going to kick in again, and that top's going to spin. To me, that's hell on earth. Now, here's our next point, and just listen to this, because this is crucial for people to see when it comes to their answers. Why haven't you been able to change yourself? So I don't know how long you've been in counseling, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. You're still the same person going to counseling. Why? And maybe you didn't go to counseling. You've just been reading books and attending church and doing all this work. All the things we talk about that we do to try to change and maintain. Why isn't it working? Because you can't improve the flesh in the power of the flesh. Think about it for a minute. How does flesh improve flesh? It just can't. And I use the example of my hand having a problem hitting me in the eye, and then I lift weights till it gets so big and now it knocks me out. The flesh cannot improve the flesh. And here's why. If you're living out of the soul and out of the body with the veil there that we've talked about, you're living in the power of the flesh. The flesh is an absolute. And good or bad will turn the wheel of the flesh. I use a little thing of just a water wheel here. And you know how you have the chute that comes down and the water runs off of that? Well, it doesn't matter if one drop is called bad and the other one's good and the other one's bad and the other one's good. It still turns the wheel. So whatever you're doing, you're putting yourself in a loop in the flesh. Flesh doesn't improve flesh. Now, I really want to make that point with people because they haven't given up on themselves yet. Flesh will not improve the flesh. All it does is put you on the Romans 7 wheel, where I'm doing the very thing I don't want to do, and yet I was trying to do the good, but the good I want to do I can't do because it's making me do bad because it's flesh. The soul man will eat from the tree of good and evil. And so we ask this question, and we ask questions only to get people thinking in a different way. And so you can ask things that are shocking at first. And we have a lot of little statements we make like that because we associate a definition with a term. And when I use the term, you just go with the definition that's been given you. And what if it wasn't right? So, heaven will be full of unsaved people. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, salvation refers to deliverance and victory. That's the word. So, there's a lot of people that will go to heaven, but they've never been saved from any problem they've ever had. So there'll be unsaved people there. Now, salvation for nearly everyone in this room means born again, but that's not what it means in the Bible. Read it. I challenge them in seminaries to prove me wrong about that. So you say things like that, and here's something I'd say at this point to you. Should a Christian avoid evil? And everybody's going to say yes. Should a Christian avoid good? You see how tricky that gets? Now, right there, people are going to shut down, and I don't care if they are thinking about their Aunt Grace's pie and being there this weekend and what they have to do with the kids. Right there, you've told them in a church they need to avoid good. Everything stopped.
Huh?
The clock stops. Yeah, the clock stops there. And so what do I mean by that? Let me explain it to you. Here's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God's standard, and again, work the diagram. Don't let it work you. Just read around. Put little notes there where you want to make the first point, the second point, and the third. So maybe right here I'm going to put a little 1 because the first thing I want to talk about is God's standard. And so God's standard is, if you're in Christ, you're accepted. If you're out of Christ, you're rejected. Everybody understand that? Yes. Well, here's my second point that I know you'll understand then. If you do evil and go below God's standard, He rejects you because you're unrighteous. You still got everybody tracking with you. Then I move to my third point. Did you ever think that good and evil come from the same tree and they're both prohibited? And God never lifted His commandment to not eat from that tree? And if you do good and go above God's standard, He'll reject you because you're self-righteous. And so we add to God's standard and we become a Jesus plus person. Now, we all know this, that here's Christ. And to add to Him is to subtract from Him. Because to place a commandment down here that I believe you need to keep has just hid part of Him. So if you add, you subtract. Now, you know refrigerator magnets and you know tricycles. You can load a tricycle up with so many refrigerator magnets you can't pedal it anymore. You can't even see it anymore. I like that. Did you see that Bruce Almighty? Did you see that movie? Yeah, it's really a good movie, Bruce Almighty. But he decides to put all the prayers on postums. The next thing you see him, he's just covered with these postums. You know, all the prayers of the whole world are on postums. They just cover the room and cover him. Well, that's all you're doing with him, because the more you add to him, the more you actually take away from him, until in most religions you can't even see him anymore. You become a Jesus plus person and you're without Jesus. Add enough pluses and you don't have anything. The flesh can be strengthened through the good or the evil. And here's the frightening thing. To the level of self-righteousness you can attain to, because you've been strengthening your flesh through self-righteousness, one day it'll break out in unrighteousness and go all the way to the bottom. Self-righteousness will reveal unrighteousness. It will break out in that. And do you know what's interesting too? Even unrighteousness will make for self-righteousness. You want to be the most self-righteous people I've ever been around anywhere in any of my experiences are the Christians in prison.
Oh, how funny.
They're unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable, the Christians in prison. They got in there at a -100, And now they just go right past Christ and they're driving for the plus 100. They're criticizing each other all the time. They're judging each other all the time. It's misery in there. It's just absolute misery. And for the first time in their lives, they have structure. And so it's the structure keeping them, not God, but the structure. And so they just working their way, hammering away up this thing. And it is a big shock, and anybody in prison ministry knows it, that there's about an 80 or 90% chance that the prisoner that's made it up here and has become the prison chaplain assistant, he is recognized as the pastor of the prison. I have yet to work with one of those guys that when they got out didn't go all the way down here. Not once. You're not going to improve the flesh in the power of the flesh. And there's the thing. That somebody drinks at this level, this level, this level, this level. They quit. How much are they going to start with? Yep. Even Alcoholics Anonymous now says, as they define it as a disease, it's progressive while you're sober.
Oh, they say that?
They say it.
Oh, I need that.
Yeah, so they say that it's progressive while you're sober. Well, if you're sober in the power of the flesh is still getting stronger. Isn't that wild? Okay. I have an outer and an inner life. I look to others to meet my needs. It begins to develop. I end up in this spiral. I'm other controlled, and I want to change myself. I really want to change. I'm at a place where I want to change. But you will not change yourself in the power of the flesh, because the flesh eats from a tree, and two things strengthen the flesh. Good or evil will strengthen your flesh. And so to go down the road of doing good is going to hang you out in the end. All right. Write down in a sentence what that diagram means to you.
This one?
Now tell me what you have written for this then. Tree of good and evil.
If we don't live out of the life of Christ, we can only be self-righteous or unrighteous.
Okay. Yeah. See, don't forget where we're headed in all this.
Yeah.
Because we've already defined the problem and said the problem is this inner life in here. Now, suicidal people are right on track.
Yeah, amen.
They believe the only way out's death, but it's not the death of the outer man, it's the death of the inner man. So you see the flow of what I'm trying to do. We've had four lectures here that talk about your condition, born dead to God. And you look to others and you've developed an inner life now that you'd like to change. And you've tried some really good things to change, but it hasn't changed it. Amy's friend did read the Bible. He did preach. He did do those things. We've done all those things. We've really tried to change it. And we haven't been able to change it. In fact, I'm even feeling myself getting worse. You know, not only am I not changing, I'm getting worse. In fact, I see Christians involved in things that they were never involved in when they were unbelievers. You know, it's just amazing. Well, why is that? How come I haven't been able to fix myself? Well, because God forbid that I eat from a tree called the knowledge of good and evil. Good and evil. Because either one will strengthen the flesh of man and move you into this coin of sin that on this side is unrighteousness and this side is self-righteousness. You're going to have to look for something outside yourself. Because you cannot change yourself in any area of your life. And in fact, you get committed to changing yourself and you're going to get worse. Our goal right now is to start to bring this person to absolute frustration. And total frustration. Because all right, I'm not disagreeing anymore. I am insane. I am crazy. I do have lying thoughts. My emotions take me everywhere. I'm on a roller coaster all the time. Everybody I know I can be knocked down and put out by a stare. That's all it takes. You know, I'm done. Now, are you going to give me something to do? Now that I know this, can I have something to do? Well, here's the problem with giving you something to do now. It's just going to strengthen your flesh. You cannot change. God's plan is to exchange. He doesn't want to improve. He wants to remove. So you're pretty much at this point presenting no hope.
Yeah, really.
Because if people thought knowledge and understanding set you free, you'd given them a heap of it.
Yeah.
Here's why you act the way you act. Here's why you feel the way you feel. Here's the source of all that. We understand your inner life. We've pretty much detailed it for you. Do you have more information than you've ever gotten? Yes, I do. Okay, now here's the last thing that's a real kicker. You can't change it. You cannot change. You can do evil or good and you won't change it. Well, at that point, a heart gets revealed because what is the answer? It's got to come outside of you. It has to be something supernatural. If you don't deal with the spirit of man, you never dealt with a man. Okay, we got our progression there?